Greetings. Thanks so much for taking time to just receive the circle training as we prepare for the North Star Community Church Women's Dream event. I'm Jamie Wilson, and Jen Konechny is joining me to facilitate this today. During the time that you're with us, we will just cover an introduction to Circle, the method for communication that we'll use for this event, as well as a link to a video that will give you a more practical example of what this looks like. And then also an invitation to join either an in-person or virtual practice session where you'll kind of put to use the skills that you've learned today. In the email that you received, this form is included, so you'll be able to be a fill-in-the-blank kind of person and have all of those blanks filled in as we go through, as well as the link to the video that I just referenced. And of course, if after this training, you have any additional questions or need to reach out about a different training opportunity, we're certainly open to that. We want to support you as you are continuing to support women through this event. So without further ado, we'll go into the training. So an introduction to Circle. Circle really just can be used for many different types of conversations or conflict resolution or even celebrations. But for this training, we're going to lead you through, we'll give you the skills required just to lead small groups with the Circle practice or method. And Jen, do you want to give us a little bit more background on Circle from your experience?
Sure. I'll just give a brief history of Circle because there are whole day trainings that are crafted around Circle conversations and the history of Circle. But Circle has been around as long as human conversations have been happening. It was a very regular part of ancient traditions and communities and indigenous people groups. It has always been a way to connect, to be involved with decision making as a community. It has been used to address punitive issues where maybe someone needed to have consequences for their actions inside of a community. It's been used for grief, like you said, celebrations. It's just been around forever. And even in our biblical heritage, you would have seen Circle conversations happening around like the Last Supper table, for example, and the Lord was passing the cup around. You would have seen people talking as they were sharing with the cup. And in recent history, I would say this, all over the world, Circle has been used commonly throughout the last hundreds or thousands of years. In the US, it's been a little bit of a lost art, with the exception of Native American people groups, which regularly use Circle, just as I described. And so what we're starting to see now, though, is that our culture, our American culture, is starting to pick this up. And you're starting to see it used restoratively in community settings, addressing harm in communities. You're seeing it used, as Jamie could tell you, she's used it in middle school settings. Circle conversations are being used in school environments, work environments, in leadership groups, decision-making circles of any kind. And so that's just a brief history of how Circle is being used, has been used, and is being used today.
Great. Thanks, Jen. That's all really helpful background just to recognize that this is not something that Jen and I made up, that it is really a tried and true method that has been withstanding the test of time and allows for, just really positive outcomes in communication. So with that, we can get to the fun fill in the blank portion. So Circle is a simple method to communicate conducted in a circle using a talking piece. So what are those things? What are the roles and supplies required to do Circle? So we have the Circle keeper or Circle facilitator. And that would be just you as the leader. You will take on that role going into this event as the Circle keeper. You'll obviously have participants, which are going to be our attendees for this event. And you'll have an object to be used as the talking piece. And we're dreaming up what that'll look like for this event. We probably can't pass around a nautical bowl because it'll melt, but we might find something really fun. Something, if you've been a part of Mom's group, you've seen a lot of times we're using like heart-shaped rocks or maybe a little cross. In the middle school setting, I actually would bring a variety of talking pieces. I had like a spinner fidget item. I had this little stress ball globe. I had a circle or a heart-shaped rock. and a couple other things. And I let them choose kind of what felt like the best option for the day. So it was kind of fun to give them a little bit of a choice, especially middle schoolers like that autonomy and independence to make decisions. And then the last one here, snacks and beverages are never a bad idea. So we all know how much food can connect us, how it can be disarming, how it can bring comfort, and also just meet some of those basic needs that allow sort of the higher order needs and unlock our minds to focus on some of our more social emotional things, not just oh my stomach is growling. So snacks and beverages are a great idea there. So getting back into what Jen was saying with the history of Circle, why do we do Circle? So one of the key things here is that there is safety in the type of conversation. There is no power differential. So that would be what you fill in the blank there, power differential. And that term is being used a lot. You'll hear that, especially with women in leadership or other kind of cultural conversations that have been going on. But really what that means is that my voice as the circle keeper is of no more importance than anybody else as the participant. So putting that into context, even with middle schoolers, as the adult in the room, as a circle keeper, I would share and respond to every question the same as all of the students. So if the question was, tell me about a time you really messed up and, felt, embarrassed about something that you did as a middle schooler, I was going to share a story of being a middle schooler and had an experience like that as well. So it puts me at the same level as all of the participants. And so there is a lot of safety when we demonstrate authenticity and vulnerability as a facilitator. It invites all of the other participants to be the same, to open up and share the same. So it honors stories, it fosters curiosity and empathetic listening. So again, just for the same reasons that I just said about not having a power differential, it allows for people to share their stories. It allows us to be curious and wonder, okay, well, I want to learn more about this person. And just having that empathetic ability to say, oh, I've had a similar situation. Not that we interject when somebody else is talking, and we'll get into the ground rules a little bit later, but it just allows us to hear the humanity of every participant around the circle as that talking piece is going around. Another benefit of Circle is that it's self-governing. So that would be what you fill in the blank there. And what I mean by that, again, is with the talking piece being passed around, if you have 8 participants, you recognize that, hey, I'm number 2. There are 6 more people that still need to speak. So while we don't want to time box everybody as they're sharing in Circle, it does give us a visual reminder that other people need a chance to share and who also hasn't shared, right? So some of us have been in a situation where you're in a small group where maybe 1 or 2 people are always doing the back and forth talking or interjecting or redirecting the story back to themselves. This allows for everyone to have equal opportunity to share. And then the last bullet point there is that it's easy. Seriously, anyone can do this. And there were some examples of videos that we were trying to figure out which one was best to put in here. But one of the examples was like 1st or 2nd graders, and they truly were able to honor a talking piece being passed around and wait their turn to speak. So I promise you that us as adult women can definitely handle speaking in this nature, especially if young elementary school kids can. Jen, any other examples that you might want to share about the various ways that Circle can be used, or an example of maybe how it has elicited stories versus, taking sides?
Absolutely. I've used Circle in a lot of different settings. I've used Circle in small groups. I've used Circle. I have been involved with training mediators. I have helped conduct leadership training in corporate settings where the leadership was looking for better methods for connecting with their teams and helping their employees who are having some areas of like productivity issues or just mental health, checking in with their employees. And so how to have conversations that might be intense or could be somewhat confrontational, and finding a way to come at that conversation in a more healthy way. So, and in a way that actually elicits connection and all of the things you said, fostering curiosity and empathetic listening, and moving into decision making or moving into problem solving. So it's been used, and it can be used between two people. A circle can be used between two individuals who just pass the talking piece back and forth to one another. And I would say I've actually had success with that in misunderstandings in friendship situations where we just pass it back and forth and talk, and it's been really helpful and really productive. And just coming out the other side feeling like everyone was heard. Those are just a few examples. But I wanted to say something more about the self-governing aspect too. What's really great about Circle is the pressure is really off the circle keeper. So as you all are leading tables, one of the things you're going to notice is that there's a group accountability that starts to happen. And so if the circle goes off track and someone pulls it back to answer or respond to someone, a lot of times what will happen is the circle will correct itself. So people that are individuals in the circle will notice, hey, we got off track there. Let's keep the talking piece moving forward and honor the talking piece. And so you'll find that the whole group takes ownership, which is actually pretty cool. So if any of you are feeling like you don't know what you're going to do, it's going to be okay. So that's about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great reminder. Yeah. And I've had the situation happen where someone's like, "Oh, can I break circle? Can I take it, can I pass the talking piece back?" And a great question, you can pose it back to the group. Would we mind if we brought the talking piece back to this person for a moment? Or you as a circle keeper could ask the question, um, you know, can you hold that thought? And we're going to continue the round of circle. We can do another round just for responses to what was shared, right? So you can always do another round of just feedback following an open-ended question. So that's where there's a little bit of discernment that will happen on your part. But again, I think the majority of the time you'll see the group wanting to answer and wanting that piece to continue to move around so that everybody does get the opportunity to share. Or you'll have somebody say, well, so and so didn't get a chance to share yet. Let's hear from them. And again, that's where the pressure comes off of you. So really good point, Jen. Thanks for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the how-to steps. So the opener, that's really the first part of it. And it can be as simple as just asking everyone to share a high and a low, or just, the weather report of the day for themselves. What are you feeling? What's the temperature of your day? So that's a really easy way of just having an opening type of question. Or it could be something depending on your audience. What did you have for lunch today? Why'd you pick that? It's icebreakers. Think of it as just like a kind of an icebreaker. And so, again, going into this event, we will have an agenda with some questions already crafted. So you won't have to create this as you go into the Women's Dream event. We'll have the questions already laid out for you at the table that you will just guide your group through. And so don't be alarmed that you'll have to come up with that agenda on your own. Building common ground and establishing values. So that's really the next component. And that's, again, what establishes the safety of this type of communication. So example of some values would be respect, honesty, confidentiality, humor, and the list goes on, right? But there are kind of those key things, right, around authenticity, confidentiality, etc. And again, what we will have prepared for you at this event is just a list of values. And then each of the women can kind of speak to maybe what value is most important for them, showing up to this circle, showing up to this event, right? Because this is going to be a little vulnerable for people to talk through what are the dreams, what are some of the things that they've never felt empowered to speak out loud. So a way that you can facilitate that type of conversation I've done this in the past with middle schoolers, is just having note cards and just having them write down their name and then a value that they need in order to, engage in this circle and feel safe. And then the talking piece goes around, and each person then introduces themselves and shares the value that they chose and why. So that's just one example of a way that you can do that common ground and value exercise. But there are so many different ways that you can do that. And Jen, I'm not sure if you have an example that you'd want to share of establishing common ground or, building upon those values.
Yeah, I think with the values, I think you really hit the nail on the head and explained it well. I would just add to that one of the things that's nice about listing values and having everyone hear everyone else's values is if the conversation starts to go, maybe someone says something to someone or comments on something they shared, and that person feels like it didn't honor the value that they said they needed in order to feel safe to share. It's really useful and helpful to be able to point to that specific value and say, hey, I had said earlier, this is a value that's important to me. When you said that, it made me feel like that value wasn't being honored or respected. And so, it's good to be able to point to the actual thing instead of pointing to the person and saying you did something wrong. And it
Yeah.
helps everybody hear it. And so that's really cool.
Yeah, and that goes back to that self-governing component of why circle is so important, right? Because then you, as a circle keeper, aren't fully responsible of establishing those values or keeping things in check. The circle itself will help to honor those as well. So really good point there. So then the ground rules, and again, this is something that can be laid out right away after the opener and the common ground. So again, filling in the blanks here, no technology during circle, being fully present. We're all adults, take care of yourself. So if you need to use the restroom or grab water or do those things, feel free to do that. You just, kindly excuse yourself from the circle. And not be disruptive, right? Upon re-entry to the circle, you're kind of quietly sliding out and sliding back in without, breaking the circle momentum. Assume the best in me. So assuming best intent about what people are saying, really honoring what they're saying and not directing it toward yourself, honoring where the person is coming from. It is their unique story to share. And so just that assuming best intent goes a long way. So here's another ground rule. What's said in circle stays, what's learned in circle leaves. So we want to maintain that confidentiality, which is the next bullet point, and honor what people are sharing, right? Unless they're giving you explicit permission, please go share it with others. We're going to say that that really kind of stays in the circle. But gosh, what you learn from that, the things that you've learned about yourself, the things that you've learned about the method of circle and its effectiveness, definitely go share those things. Share your experience in circle. Just don't share other people's stories unless that permission has been made explicit. So again, goes to that next bullet point. The next one is pay attention to your body language. So there's a lot of communication that happens with nonverbals, and it's important to honor that engagement within the circle by use of your face and your body language, right? If we're leaning back and we're checked out, or we're, kind of looking like we could be any place other than there, it can be dishonoring to the person who's speaking in that moment. It doesn't mean that you have to love everything that everybody is saying, but give everybody the time and attention that you would want them to give to you. One of the ground rules that I think is kind of a fun piece to add in as well is passing the talking piece left. And that allows the talking piece to cross your heart as a reminder to speak from the heart. So that would be what's in the blanks there. Cross your heart and speak from the heart. And again, that's just that authenticity, the vulnerability to share. And I think the more that we put that out there and give of ourselves in that way, the more that other people are invited in to do the same. And so you as a circle keeper, if you can really demonstrate that as you're sharing and asking the questions, you'll be I should back up and say too, as the circle keeper, when you ask the question, the open-ended question, you will be the first one to respond and start by passing left. So you really set the tone for how people show up and ask that question. And again, you'll get the questions in advance, so you'll have time to kind of prepare how you might respond to those. And it's just an important piece for you to remember as a circle keeper of just really bringing your full self to the table. So the next step then, it would be getting into the rounds of circle questions. So the circle facilitator would create these in advance. And again, we will create these for you, so the pressure's off. But some examples of what we might be looking at for the dream event. What have people told you you're good at? And do you use that talent or skill regularly? So then you would respond and start by passing. What is something that comes easily to you that you may take for granted, or that other people may not be as skilled or capable? What is something you used to do, enjoy, or want to achieve that you have left behind or quit doing, and why? So again, these are questions that you'll see will kind of dive deep quickly, provided you're willing to go there and just share in a vulnerable way. Another thing to think about too, as you're going through the rounds of questions, is that a pass, if somebody says, I want to pass, or a non-answer, I don't know, I don't want to answer, that is a perfectly good answer. One thing that you can do too is, depending on the talking order, somebody might not be prepared if they're the first person on your left. And so they might feel like they need to pass and hear from others, or just mentally prepare for what they would say. And so when the circle piece or the talking piece comes back to you, you can say, did anybody want to share that didn't already get a chance? So it's not a second round on the same question, but it's allowing those who passed to maybe have an opportunity, and it just goes to them and back around to you. And then the closing. So again, closing is kind of like the opener, where it can be really simple. Just, was there anything that stood out to you through this experience today? One of the things that I would do with middle schoolers is just an activity of, before circle I was, and after participating in circle I am. And what that meant was, before coming to circle, I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. And after being in circle, I now realize I, have an opportunity to correct my behavior. Something to that effect, right? But it just gives a really simple model for people to close out and say, okay, I've completed this activity. Now what do I walk away with? And Jen, I don't know if you have another example of what a closer could be.
Well, something we had talked about earlier before we got on the video here was that you can close in prayer, for example.
Yes.
You could do something like, I know someone who had done a grief circle with their family. They had lost a family member, and they closed with some final words they would have wanted to say, and they released floating lanterns. And so it was like a way to close the circle. And so you can get as creative as you want to get with it. It's just a time to bring closure to what you've done. So
yeah, and that's great. And for this event, we're kind of toying around with what that closer looks like, if it will be an actual activity that will get, women up and kind of moving around to close out kind of in a larger group. So we'll be giving you the details as we define this even more as we get closer to the event. So just, some examples that you can put in there for purposes of the worksheet here. So as we have talked about circle and its uses, there's kind of a greater vision. And as Jen mentioned, she's used this in small groups as well. But there is biblical foundation, as Jen mentioned too, with the history of circle, just for, everybody speaking to their own story, for biblical conflict resolution and correction among believers, really with that goal of becoming more like Jesus, of having that empathetic listening, that ability to correct in a loving and honoring way. And so here's some scripture verses that you can kind of take a look at. Of course, there are many more throughout the Bible, but here are just a few examples, especially with Matthew 18:15-20, just about the process for correction and conflict resolution. So hopefully, as we continue to utilize circle, we'll see that we can also use and leverage this method for other types of groups within the church. So as mentioned at the beginning, here's a link to the circle example video. It's about 5 minutes. So we invite you to please watch that and just see how this is put into practice. And then, as mentioned, we have a required either in person or virtual option before our women's event on the 18th. So we have on May 3rd, two options, either a virtual in the morning or an in-person that'll happen in the evening. And then May 8th, there will be a virtual option as well. So we will include the links to all of those trainings or the logistical details in those. But again, if none of these work for you, please reach out to us. Just respond to the email and let us know, what your constraints are. We want to honor that and make sure that every woman that is leading has the opportunity to feel well practiced and confident going into this. And so we will do our best to work with you to make something that fits your schedule. We certainly do ask that everybody makes, their best effort to attend one of the options, but we also want to accommodate where it makes sense to do that. So with that said, we thank you for your time and attention to this and are so excited to participate in this event with you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.